Good morning. Just driving through the mountains because I'm headed up to buy a new boat. It's like winter is here in the mountains. I am now a new owner of a Cape Dory 25D. But I spent the night on her just last night for the first time. I'm going to work on the boat. There is a compression issue with the original Yanmar 1GM inboard engine, but before I get started on that boat work, I want to go ahead and make some breakfast. And this is an Origo 4000 alcohol stove, non-pressurized. Probably gonna have to fill it with some alcohol, so maybe I should look at the instructions. Let me go ahead and do that and I'll get back to you. No idea what I'm doing here, so I'm just gonna wing it. That's what I do. And we have flame. Okay, so here we are looking at the engine. This is the 1983 Yanmar 1GM. It is not the 1GM10, which is updated. This is the 1GM, which is just 7 horsepower. And as I understand things, it was running okay when the owner last used the boat, until just before he parked the boat, he noticed that it was running slow, and it was not pushing. It reduced power, and it wasn't revving as high as it had in the past. He brought the boat back into the slip, had his mechanic come out. His mechanic looked at it, replaced the fuel pump, and replaced the air filter. The air filter was so degraded it was just falling apart. I believe it's just a foam type insert. So those things were replaced. It didn't fix the trouble. He then had a Yanmar, the Yanmar dealership come out and had a look at it. They checked for compression, which is often the problem with these engines, and they found that the compression was low. It didn't have the compression it should. They immediately recommended, without doing any work on the engine, immediately recommended he replace and repower instead of trying to fix it. The owner is not mechanical, so it would have cost him hourly labor to troubleshoot and repair the problem. And he decided with some other things just to sell the boat. Because the engine was running when the boat was last brought into the slip, I'm going to attempt first here to get the engine running. And I don't expect to be running well because the compression issue is going to be remains an issue. But as I understand it, the trouble is very likely to be with carbon buildup around the valves. Now it could be a lot different, it could be something else, but that's the idea. But to start, let's go ahead and just bleed the fuel. Make sure that there's no air bubbles in the fuel. I've already checked the oil. It is black, it is nasty, it needs to be changed, but for right now let's just see if we can get it started, and then if we can, then we'll move on to the next thing. And so what we have, if you're looking at it, behind there is the diesel tank, and you've got on the left right here, you've got the source diesel line. It comes up over this way, and you can see over here there's an on-off, there's a switch, cutoff switch. The diesel comes down this line here and comes to the fuel water separator. After the fuel water separator, it comes over here to the engine, to the fuel pump. This is the low pressure fuel pump, and this is the location where you have the bleeder lifter right here, a manual component. This was just replaced, and it was probably replaced for absolutely no reason, but it was replaced, and in this particular case I happen to have the original right down here. So after that low pressure pump goes through this line right here. I don't know if you can see that or not at the end of my screwdriver. And it comes up over this way to the fuel filter. And the fuel filter is the first place where you're going to bleed it. And the previous owner actually has it marked with red. Here's the bleeder valve right here. So I'm going to crack that open and try to bleed the fuel through. And then after the fuel filter on the engine, the fuel comes back underneath here, around here to the high pressure fuel pump, which is in this area here. And here is another secondary bleed screw right here. And so I'm going to bleed it from in the back here, in the front, and then from the high pressure pump, it goes up through this line and over here, and then down to the injector. Sorry I don't have better lighting for you here. You could also crack this banjo bolt at the injector to ensure that it's bled there, but from what I understand, once it gets to the high, you just bled to the high pressure fuel pump, it's really quick to work its way through here and out this way. Yeah, and then this hose right here is the return. I was just wondering why it was going. It goes up and around and down behind the engine, and then through underneath the wet exhaust, and then back up. And this sorry again for the light, but the right hand side tube is that return. Oh, it didn't take much. Now it's loose. So let's see what happens when I bleed this. It is dry around it right now. I'm not getting any action on that. Of course, it's this is the old one right here, and it's just this tiny little. Oh, maybe I gotta lift it up a lot farther than I thought. Let's go ahead and try that. Maybe I'm not getting anything on it. Let's see. No. It's taken off a long time. I don't know if the fuel filter in this case is fuel filter chamber over here is actually have any fuel in it. They did say that it wouldn't start the last time someone tried it, but frankly, if the fuel isn't bled, that certainly could be it. Okay, I'm not sure what you're gonna be able to see of this, but I'm gonna try to get this fuel filter off. We'll see. Just don't know what's in here. Is it full? Is it not full? There we go. Oops. So there is some in here, but it's certainly not full. So the question is, if I actuate this pump, does fuel come out? I don't see any fuel coming out of there. So let's go ahead and put this back up. Okay, well, all right, well, there's that. I just don't think that that's actuating the way it should. I did not show you the bleeding process. There's just not a lot of room in here, and so I neglected to do so, but let me show you what's happening. On the fuel feed pump, there is a lever, and that lever you can actuate. You can kind of see me doing it back there. Actuate and feed the fuel from that pump up to this location here. You're pretty much using this this fuel feed pump here manually. And I was pumping it, and I didn't feel like it was actually moving anything. I checked the fuel filter bowl, and it was about half full. I don't know if that was because I've been pumping for so long or what it was, but what happened was I used in this particular case, I cranked the engine over just a little bit using the hand crank. And as I did that by degrees, I found that there was a little bit more, like 1 degree maneuver in there that didn't feel just like play. It felt like it was actually pumping something. And as soon as I found that location, a few pumps later, I found that I was getting fuel out of this bleeder valve. So I think that it wasn't working very well until after I turned the engine to a certain location. I haven't confirmed that, but that seems the way it is. So that took quite a while before I turned the engine crank around just a little bit to find that little bit of feeling on the lifter pump to get it bled there. Now once I got it bled there, it was very quick. I cracked this next, and again using this lifter pump in a position that was providing what I felt was actual pumping action. It came out fairly quickly from here too. Now after that, everything else after that is from the high pressure, the injector pump, which is right here. And so what I did from there was I cracked this top nut and I cranked the engine over. And you can lift up the decompression valve. That will save the battery. But I cranked it over until I was getting fuel out of here, and then shut this down. Now what I failed to do, and that only took a few moments. It really didn't take very long because fuel was already here. But what I failed to do was I failed to run that until no air was coming out. And so that took some trial and error, some fumbling around, but I did it. And then this tube right here, the high pressure injector pump, doesn't actually force a lot of fuel through. It's not a great amount of volume per se. It's a lot of pressure. But without this pipe, this is the exit from that pressure pump. Without this being filled, it takes a while to go ahead and fill this up. With the way the engine is situated, it's hard for me to get back over to where the inlet to the injector is to crack that open. It's back here under the sink a little bit. You can't really see it. It's hard to get to, and it happens to be right over the top of the alternator. So I didn't mess with that. What I did was I just cranked the engine for 10 seconds at a time or so, with the compression, with the decompression off, or the compression off, the decompression on. And I did that probably 5 or 6 times. And finally the engine started catching, and eventually the engine started. The engine started once and it sputtered out, and then I started it again, it started up, and it just kept on running. So again, I'm sorry I didn't show all this to you. I really wanted to show you though what we were doing because of the confusion about the bleed. The bleed screw on this particular engine. This one's marked in red. That's just a cap. It may work just as well, but this is the small screw is actually the proper screw for bleeding. You have to be very careful with the fuel coming off the high pressure fuel pump. It's very dangerous. It could penetrate your skin and send you to the hospital. Hey, so I also want to point out that what I found on this particular engine was that the owner I bought the boat from, he was running it. He told me that he was running the engine at about 2,800 RPM. That was his cruising RPM range, or engine speed. But in reading the service manual and the owner's manual, it seems to me this is a high-speed engine, and cruising is meant to be done at about 3,400 RPM, with max RPM at 3,600. And so the continuous rated power and RPM is 3,400 on this engine. And so at 2,800, I don't think that they're doing a very good job of burning the fuel efficiently and so forth. And I really think that may be a problem, or that is probably contributing to the issue. And as a matter of fact, at 2,800 RPM, according to the service manual, 2,800 RPM is the least efficient engine speed in terms of fuel consumption that you can run this engine. So if you max it out a little bit more, it should keep the engine clean. And then in terms of its max RPM, 3,600 RPM, you you can only run it for an hour at that max RPM. So anyways, this is all hardening. I'm going to try to blow out some of that carbon here today by revving it up a little bit, and I mean, not for long because it won't be under load, but to see if I can get something going and to learn more about the engine. Okay, back from the store. I have what I need to change the oil, so let's go ahead and try to start this thing up. Now, one thing to note, some people say that it should start right up immediately, and there is some issues with the back pressure going through the wet exhaust and so forth. But according to the service manual, depending upon the type of fuel you've got, it could take, on a cold day, it's mid-40s right now, that's Fahrenheit, it could take 12-14 seconds for it to start, and that's perfectly acceptable and expected based on the service manual. And it really depends on, again, the fuel that you have. And here in the United States, we have a relatively low amount of cetane in our diesel fuel, and that has a direct effect on how quickly it'll start up. So I suspect it'll probably take 10, 12, 14 seconds for it to start up here this morning. 10:23, we'll let it warm up for a few moments, maybe 15 minutes or something like that, and then we'll go ahead and shut it down and change that oil out. Alright, I don't know how much of this you're going to be able to see. Let's see how much we get out, how much oil we get out of it. And then I emptied this water bottle. Here at the marina, we can give them old oil in canisters like this. So let's go ahead and see what we got here. Well, anyways, we'll get this started, and we'll get back to you. Oh, okay, got a little bit more pressure here. In terms of what we have now, yeah, maybe about here. This is not quite 4 liters, so probably we're pretty close. That's a little bit more in the third. So I think we're pretty darn close. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. We'll put some new fresh oil in it, and then we'll run the engine again, do that, and then we'll change the oil one more time, put a new filter on it, and go from there. I was looking for one of those pouring spouts that were graduated, but this is all I could find from the hardware store on short notice. So I'm going to go ahead and fill. It's 1.3 liters is what it takes. So I'm going to go ahead and fill it to 650 milliliters, and I'll double that. I'll probably come up a little short the first time to see where it is. I'll start using the dipstick, but at least we've got that to start. And we are just, what, a quarter inch or so, a few millimeters, 4 millimeters from the top mark. So this was left to me, and this should be just, I think it'll be fine to clean things up a little bit. Obviously they have been using this. The CF designation here may not be recommended. Let me look at the service manual, but I think for temporary use it'll probably be just fine. Again, I just want to clean out those and dilute the gunk in the passages a little bit more. So to empty it out, put this in, take this out, and put fresh of the other motor oil, I think is the way to go. I was looking over the service manual last night before bed, and I found just a wealth of information that I just had no idea. This is in the operating instructions for the engine, and they go into detail about the type of fuel you should use. This is where I got the information about the cetane values and whether or not the engine will start properly. There's a whole table about the different characteristics of the fuel and how it will affect the use of the engine. But over here we get into lubricating oil, and it mentions oils that are multi-grade. This is what was with the boat. SAE 30 is a single grade. What I bought, the 15W40, is a multi-grade. Well, they don't explicitly recommend it, but multi-grade oil comprises SAE number 5W20, 10W30, and 20W40. I think we'll be just fine to be using 10W30 or this 15W40. I just filled it back with that. Wow, what is going on? Did I overfill it or something? Oh yeah, it's way overfull. Huh. So I really didn't do a very good job of extracting that oil the second time. I thought it was a little. Okay, so that's what I've got to do. I've got to go ahead and get that oil out of there. I won't take it all out. I'll take it partially out, get it down to the operating level, run it, take it out again, and I hope this pump that I'm using is gonna hold up. I don't know. All right. Well, I didn't go through the whole process of as many oil changes as I wanted to, and I didn't change the oil filter because the oil filters that I thought I had. Sorry, there's lots of wind. There is one oil filter that I have here that was left aboard, but it's got a little bit of rust and there's some water in it. I mean, the tiniest bit, but I just don't want to mess with it. So I left the oil filter that's on it. Not ideal, but unfortunately parts aren't available right now. So this being the Friday after Thanksgiving, the USA Thanksgiving holiday. Anyways, the engine's warming up again. I'm going to go ahead and put it under load a little bit, and I'm going to try to rev it up to higher revs, to even not under load, to see what happens, to see if I can blow some of that carbon out of there off the exhaust valve, what I think is probably the problem. But I just want to show you that right now this is in idle, and the RPM, the RPM is just above 800 RPM right there. But we're gonna let it warm up at idle, and then I'm gonna go ahead and try to put it up full throttle for a few moments and see what comes of it. The gearbox is disengaged, so we're just gonna rev it up here. Sounds good. Granted, it didn't make it to 3600, just to 3400. I don't know what that means, but I've got a running engine, and I think it'll be fine. And I'm hoping that the wind will die a little bit. Take it out and see what happens. But I'm pleased with what's going on here. I'm worn out. The things I wanted to do, lots of things I wanted to do, just don't get done. Now I'm going to have a drink. I've got my guitar. I'm going to play some music. Nothing you want to hear, don't worry. And relax. I sleep well here. We got the wind howling outside. The nice thing is tomorrow, little to no wind. So if that holds, then I'll definitely take this boat out and motor around and maybe even put up the sails. Although if there's no wind, the sails won't do much good. Thanks for watching, you guys. Really appreciate it. Cheers to you all.